Okay, the fluids have been checked. We're in the car. Have the keys in the ignition. It's time to fire this podcast up. By golly, even after over a month, Cordova still fires up. So why not the podcast? Hello, everybody, and welcome, uniting all generations and types of Mopar fans, lovers, and enthusiasts everywhere. This is the WaltPar Podcast. So ever grateful to have you here with me today. My name is Scott Gresser, and this is episode number 13. My handle is Mopar since 1960. That's my personal one. And you can join me right here on the WaltPar Podcast. My email is waltparpodcast@aol.com. Find me on Facebook, Instagram, X, and Threads. Search WaltPar Podcast. And why won't this script move? There we go. Okay. You can search me also. I'm also on YouTube and Rumble. Search WaltPar. I'm on most podcast platforms. So please join me and learn to hit the subscribe button, hit the like button if you like what you hear. It'd be very much appreciated. Yes, now I'm recording this on August 11th, 2024, and it's been since July 3rd I did episode number 12. It's great to be back. Been busy putting together my Demon 340. I got the quarter windows in. I got the quarter windows interior trim in. When you know how you get that chance when you put that screw in and you're trying to find the hole to get it to tighten, and I finally did. There's no comfortable position when you work on interior pieces, and when I did, threw my back out for about a week and missed my part-time job for a week, but I was able to get mended so I could help out with the fire department chicken barbecue to the department I used to belong to. Unfortunately, that is the same weekend as Carlisle, so I was not able to make it to Carlisle. I've never been to Carlisle because of the event I do for the fire department, but I'm going to try to schedule something for next year, especially since it's the 100-year anniversary of the beginning of Chrysler Corporation. So we'll see if I'm going to do something there. Now, as you know, I'm also the social media director of the Mid-Ohio Mopars. We had our 33rd annual show this year, and again, it was part of Mopar Madness at Dragway 42 in West Salem, Ohio. That was their Mopar weekend, drag racing the whole bit. We take care of the show portion of it. The show was supposed to start on Saturday, August 3rd, but it was rained out for most of the day. It was raining most of the day. The track did clear out. They got drag racing in starting at about 4 o'clock. They went till 2 a.m. in the morning on Sunday. We did have a rain date for our car show, which was the following day, Sunday the 4th, and we only had like 10 cars. We had 3 of those cars show up Saturday and stuck around, but we actually had about 10 or 11 cars for the show. The thing about today's world is we have so many things going on, and, you plan for one day and you plan something else for the other. So since the people couldn't come, and there's people who do come to this show from a long ways, they make it a weekend. They come Friday, come into Saturday, do the show, and then take the time to head back on Sunday. But to have it on just one day on a Sunday does cut things short, as well as the fact that other people have other plans as well for Sunday. So we had a low turnout for that, but that's okay. It will happen. But we had a good time. I still have to post a lot of pictures on the Mid-Ohio Mopars Instagram, Facebook, X, and Threads accounts. I will get that done eventually. Now, as I was looking through the event, back in 1984, I was looking through the event sections of Hemmings Motor News. Remember, we had no internet back then or social media, or even computers for that matter. So I saw the ad, and I had to go. The event was my first Mopar Nationals. And again, that was way back in 1984. And it was held in Speedway, Indiana, west of Indianapolis, in the area of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. So this year, I did go back. There's a few years in between I went to it. But this year, I went back 40-year anniversary. But I didn't have much time on my hands. You see, my wife doesn't drive, and she was working that day in Worcester, Ohio. National Trail Raceway, when you take the back roads, takes about 2 hours to get there. So I dropped her off at work, went down there. My goal was to pass out more business cards to let more people know about the WaltPar Podcast. I met some great groups of people there. A couple groups from Cincinnati, one from Missouri, and had some great conversations. Hopefully it spreads the word out and gets more people to listen to what I'm doing. But I had some great conversations with a lot of great people. I asked if Rob was there from Mopar Collector's Guide. I stopped by their booth, which I did renew my subscription. And but he was out and about, which I knew he would be, and he would be a very busy person there with all the people that would want to talk to him. That's the head of Mopar Collector's Guide, but maybe I'll run into him sometime. Well, just to let you know, this will be a lengthy podcast on episode 13. I have a very special guest on the WaltPar Podcast. It makes me feel like I hit the big time with this one. Later on, you'll be hearing the conversation I recorded with David Zatz of Motels and StellPower.com. And he was the founder of AllPar.com. And he and I had a great hour-long conversation about Mopars, and I hope you enjoy it. That will be coming on. But it's been over a month, like I said. I think it's time we get caught up on the latest news headlinings pertaining to the Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram brands worldwide. So let's get caught up, and let's do it right now and get this out of the way. Concerning the Chrysler brand, the Pacifica has won an award. Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports it won the Newsweek Auto Award top pick for empty nesters. Also, Jeep won in 2 categories. The 2024 Wrangler won in both those categories, one for being top pick for enthusiasts and the other the top pick for outdoor adventures. Imagine that. Yes, but no, it is true. Congratulations to Jeep and Chrysler for that. And now let's go to the Dodge news. Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, reports the second episode of Season 2 of the Dodge Europe In and Out video series is now available for streaming. Now, although this does not concern new products from Dodge, it is about current owners of Challenger Hellcats. With sourcing from Hagerty, Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders is reporting values of the Challenger SRT Hellcats are starting to soften a little bit. Since February of 2024, the values on average have dropped from $61,959 to $56,690. That's on an average. But the average peak price before that was $63,898. We have several things to report on the new LB Body 2024 Charger. On that front, after being leaked to certain social media pages and video streams, Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders, Patrick Rall of StellPower, and Jonathan Ramsey of Autoblog all report that pricing for the new Charger has now been officially released. The base price for the Charger Daytona is a little less than $62,000. And to max it out with the Scat Pack or RT model, you'll be looking at around $80,000. Now, all 3 articles break down what is available and how much the options are on the Charger. In other Charger news, Jared Balfour of Mopar Insiders and David Zatz of StellPower reports Stellantis has produced a teaser video on what the Fratzonic chambered exhaust will sound like on the new Charger Daytona electric vehicle. And finally, Jared Balfour of Mopar Insiders also reports that Dodge will be making a 20-part video series on the research, development, and production of the 2024 Charger, that video series being called Built Upon a Legacy. Now, in an effort to sell more cars off the dealer lots, the Beard, Patrick Rall of StellPower, and Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders report Dodge is bringing back the Power Dollars incentive program, and this year the Hornet will be added to the list. Now, do you remember when I reported a few episodes ago that Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares told the auto manufacturers in Italy, be prepared, keep up the fight to not bring any Chinese vehicles into the country or else you will face the consequences? Why does it apply there but not in Mexico? Why doesn't this pertain to Mexico? The reason why I ask is because Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, reports Stellantis in Mexico is switching who builds the Dodge Attitude car that is sold there. It used to be built by Mitsubishi, and now it will be built and shipped from China by GAC. Now this, please remember that we'll be joining the Dodge Journey that's still being sold in Mexico, but this Dodge Journey is also built in China. So how come you got to be careful for China, but yet you're working with them? Who knows? It just goes, ugh. Let's go to the Jeeps. A celebration of the Jeep brand. Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, reports that Jeep is celebrating its 10-year anniversary being sold in Italy. Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, and Ronan Glahn of Autoblog report a new special edition Gladiator will be coming out. It will be called the High Tide and will only be sold in the state of Florida, USA. David Zatz of Stellpower reports Stellantis has released a new video for the people in Canada previewing the 2025 Jeep Compass. Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, reports the 2024 Jeep Grand Wagoneer has won the Best Full-Size SUV award by the New England Motor Press Association. And Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, also reports the European market and made Jeep Avenger, that's the JJ body, has been the best-selling SUV in Italy since the beginning of 2024. Now, while new Renegades are no longer being made for the U.S. and Canadian markets, it continues selling south of the U.S. border and in Brazil. Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, reports a new higher trim level Sahara model will be coming out for the 2025 4x2 Renegade. This will be the first time the Sahara name will be used on something other than a Wrangler. In Ram news, Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, reports the 2025 Ram 1500 Warlock is now starting to show up on dealer lots. This is based on the DT body. While the sales numbers weren't that high in the beginning, Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports the sales of Ram vehicles in Brazil have risen 218% for the first half of 2024 compared to the same time in 2023. And during that time period, 14,717 Ram vehicles have been sold this year in Brazil. While we're staying in South America, in Brazil, Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports the Ram Rampage, which is sold in Brazil, compact truck, has received the Best Medium Gasoline Pickup Award by Agência Auto Informe. I hope I said that right. And finally, speaking of Rampages, another special edition will be coming out soon. Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, reports a new Rampage Rebel Ignition Special Edition has been released. Now let's keep things going. After 28 years, a Ram and tornadoes are coming back together again. In the 1996 movie Twister, it came out, and the vehicle used to chase those tornadoes was a new Ram 2500. Now, it's 2024, 28 years later, and a new movie called Twisters has premiered, and the vehicle to chase those tornadoes is a new Ram 3500. And now, Patrick Rall of Stellpower and Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, report a new advertising campaign for Ram will be coming out featuring the movie Twisters. Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, reports that sales of the Ram brand for the first half of 2024 were down 19.5%, or over 45,000 fewer units sold compared to what happened in the same period in 2023. Ram has secured a patent. Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports it's for the third-row jump seat design found in the Ram 1500 Revolution electric concept truck that was out a lot earlier this year. It started first in Canada, anticipated in Brazil, and now officially in the United States. David Zatz of Stellpower, Jonathan Ramsey of Autoblog, and Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders report the DS Body Ram 1500 Classic will be ending production later this year. It was built at the Warren Assembly Plant in Warren, Michigan, the plant they used to call Dodge City because they used to build all the pickup trucks there. The Wagoneer and Grand Wagoneer will continue to be built there. And a little bit later on, since I found this article first, Autoblog just put one out from the Associated Press saying that the Ram 1500 Classic in the future no longer being made, which will happen this fall, approximately 2,400 employees will be laid off at the Warren Assembly Plant. Let's get into some recall news. We got a lot of stuff here. 332,000 Stellantis vehicles worldwide are being recalled. Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports that there may be a problem regarding faulty safety belt sensors. The vehicles involved were all built in Italy and spread out throughout the world, and they include the Alfa Romeo Giulia, Fiat 500e, Fiat 500X, and the Jeep Renegade. After reporting 7 vehicles catching on fire, David Zatz of Stellpower, Ronan Glahn of Autoblog, and Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders report 20,000 of the 2017 through 2021 Pacifica hybrid minivans will be recalled. Now, we got several things up from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA. They have launched an inquiry into the Wrangler 4xE. Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports they are looking into customers experiencing loss of power on 2021 to 2024 models. 68 incidents have been reported to the agency. This inquiry will go beyond what has been recalled already. And keeping on going, Zach Palmer of Autoblog and Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders report. After receiving 80 complaints, that's 80 complaints, NHTSA is investigating the 2022 Ram 1500s and Wagoneers equipped with a 5.7-liter Hemi engine with the e-torque system. They are investigating them because they are stalling, they go into park while driving, and applying the parking brake. So if you had a Hemi e-torque from 2022, that's what they're investigating, that they stall, or they will go into park while driving and applying the parking brake. Now, although this does not involve a recall, Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports NHTSA, which also oversees the Corporate Average Fuel Economy Ratings, or CAFE for short, has fined Stellantis $190.7 million in civil penalties for not meeting the fuel economy standards set for the 2019 and 2020 model years. And one more from NHTSA. Autoblog, with sourcing from the Associated Press and Robert S. Miller Mopar Insiders, report they are investigating into Dodge Journeys built between 2009 and 2020 for several things. First, the vehicles could catch on fire in the engine compartment. And number 2, the power door locks that won't unlock, they'll pass the vehicles while the passengers are in it, leaving them trapped inside their vehicles. There was one report that I read where vehicle caught on fire and the woman could not get out of her car, and it was not good. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, the car could catch on fire in the engine compartment, and while that's going on, the power locks won't be unlocking. You can't open the door to get yourself out, leaving passengers trapped inside their vehicles. All right, that's it for recall news. Now from Stellantis itself, as far as corporate news. The head of software business and product management of Stellantis has stepped down. David Zatz of Stellpower and Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders, with sourcing from Automotive News, report Mamatha Shamarthi has left effective immediately. This is the 6th higher-up to leave Stellantis within this year. And keeping on going, David Zetz of Stel Power reports Stellantis will be closing parts of the Jeep manufacturing complex for a total of 6 weeks. This may be winding down as I speak, because this was quite a few weeks back when I picked up this article. The first 2 weeks was an entire layoff of the whole complex. Some of the employees on the Gladiator side, though, will be called back to help on the Wrangler side to help assemble vehicles. And part of the 6 weeks will be used for plant retooling. More battery research is in the works. David Zetz of Stel Power reports Stellantis in Europe will be joining forces with a French government research group called CEA that is doing research on next-generation battery cells with a main goal to make electric vehicles more affordable and sustainable. In episode 12 of the WaltPar Podcast, Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders and David Zetz of Stel Power reported Stellantis vehicle sales in the second quarter of 2024 in the United States were down 21% from the same period in 2023, but saw certain segments did show gains. Well, Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders also reports the same occurred with sales in Canada. The only difference was Canada's sales were down 26% compared to the United States, 21%. David Zetz of Stel Power reports Stellantis has 32 acres of the Brampton, Ontario, Canada assembly plant parking lot and barrier land up for sale. The facility total right now is on 269 acres of land total. The plant in 2006 employed 4,200 people. It now employs 2,443 people on 2 shifts. Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports Stellantis North America has opened a new parts distribution center in Brampton, Ontario, Canada. The new facility is 513,000 square feet. Stellantis invested $25.1 million Canadian dollars into the operation, which will house 55,000 part numbers and process 2 million orders annually. The Biden administration in the United States has awarded a grant worth $1.1 billion to General Motors and Stellantis to aid in boosting EV production. The Autoline Daily Podcast, Automotive News' podcast Daily Drive, have reported on this, and Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders and Patrick Rall of Stel Power have written reports on where Stellantis' share, which is $584 million, will go to. The grants don't just go to Stellantis alone, but also to some of Stellantis' suppliers. David Zetz of Stel Power and Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders report Stellantis will be providing a home charger from Hevo, that's H-E-V-O, or $600 worth of credits on its free-to-move national network when you purchase an electric vehicle built by Stellantis. There are 2 catches, though. If you choose the home charging setup, first, you have to have a 220-volt electrical connection, and you will need to find someone qualified and pay for that person to have that system installed. Robert S. Miller, Mopar Insiders, with sourcing from Automotive News, reports the Stellantis National Dealer Council met with Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares and North America Chief Operating Officer Carlos Zarlinga regarding the slump in vehicle sales and what aid could Stellantis help with in the meantime. Stellantis is suing another supplier again. Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports Stellantis is suing Spectra Premium Mobility Solutions Limited for them stopping shipments of gasoline tanks to the Windsor, Ontario assembly plant. But a judge in Oakland County, Michigan, had denied the restraining order being asked for by Stellantis. A lawsuit has been settled. Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports Stellantis has a preliminary settlement regarding a 7-year class action lawsuit from owners of 2013 to 2015 Ram trucks equipped with the 6.7-liter diesel engine. The reason for the lawsuit involved the performance of the selective catalytic reduction system, which caused expensive repairs and loss of performance. Now, do you know what APEAL stands for? That's APEAL. It's a study by J.D. Power that stands for Automotive Performance, Execution, and Layout. David Zatz of Stellpower reported on the ratings. Ram came in second, Dodge came in 10th, Jeep came in 16th on the list. Chrysler, the brand, did not even make the list. Well, you remember when Stellantis took over and they kept buying all these different brands as well as the Chrysler brands from FCA. And they bought Opel, they bought Vauxhall. Well, he said, Carlos Tavares, that there will be a 10-year waiting period to determine if a Stellantis brand will be saved or not. Well, guess what? With what the financial condition of Stellantis is right now, Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports Mr. Tavares stated he may be cutting some brands out sooner. Now, there's all kinds of rumors going out there on the web, on video streaming and stuff like that. I'm not going to report it until I have official word, and I leave it at that. I don't go with anonymous sources. You hear when I do my news reports, I provide my source for each headline I have. That way you can double check me. As Cheryl Atkinson always says, do your own research, make up your own mind, think for yourself. Now, there have been various opinions about Stellantis CEO Carlos Tavares' performance. Jonathan Ramsey of Autoblog, Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders, with sourcing from Automotive News, report that Mr. Tavares has found some issues with the Sterling Heights assembly plant. For example, he was alarmed at the number of vehicles that need additional repairs after being assembled and what it would take to have the vehicles not need any repairs upon being finished and therefore cut down on the expense of the repair. There's a lot more to read about this. You can go to Mopar Insiders to find out, as well as Autoblog.com. A huge milestone has been made at a Stellantis assembly plant. Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports 25 million safe working hours at a 9-year-old transmission assembly plant in Kokomo, Indiana have been logged, and it's all been logged with not a single lost time injury. Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders, David Zatz of Stellpower, and Autoblog, where they sourced an article from the Associated Press, report Stellantis is introducing a U.S. voluntary separation program. This program is to offer Stellantis U.S. office employees a type of separation package to approximately 11,000 employees from the vice president positions on down. If they voluntarily leave the company, this package would be offered. The move came after what was called a disappointing first half financial report. If Stellantis feels that not enough employees would take the package, forced layoffs may be coming. This action is also in addition to another 6,400 employees who previously have taken separation packages and others who received buyouts or were laid off. The Hurricane engines are now out and available. They will be available later in August. Through Direct Connection, Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders reports there will be 2 performance levels available. Category 1 will produce 420 horsepower and 469 pounds-feet of torque. At 2,500 RPM, that engine will have a 10.41 to 1 compression ratio. Category number 3 engines will produce 550 horsepower and 531 pound-feet of torque at 2,500 RPM, but they will have a compression ratio of 9.5 to 1. These are crate engines of the Hurricane 6-cylinders that are out, the 3-liter 6-cylinders. Now, plans and development work are still being done to produce a Category X engine aiming at the drag racing market and other high-performance applications, plus for use in future drag pack vehicles. Now, you're asking how much are the Hurricane engines? Well, the manufacturer's suggested retail price for a Category 1 engine assembly is $10,495, and Category 3 engines go for $13,745. Now, if you want just a long block and want to add all your goodies to that after that, Category 1 long blocks go for $77,995, and the Category 3 long blocks will go for $11,715. Now, please remember, these prices are suggested retail prices from Direct Connection, and they do not include shipping. The price quote will vary depending on who you do business with. It could go up, it could go down. It's to the choice of the retail establishment that is offering these for sale. So please keep that in mind. Now, if you want to learn more about the engines, you can read the article on MoparInsiders.com, or you can go to DCPerformance.com also for specs and ordering information. And lastly, in the news, congratulations goes out to Mopar Collector's Guide magazine. They received at the Chrysler Carlisle Nationals this year the Chrysler Carlisle Nationals Lifetime Achievement Award for 2024. That is an award that is very much deserved, and congratulations to Rob and everyone at Mopar Collector's Guide for achieving that award. And like I said, very well deserved, and congratulations. Wish I could say something about that when I was at the Mopar Nationals. I actually forgot, but they deserve it. Thank you so much. And it's such a good idea and a good thing that I left the news on a high note, because, man, lately there's just been so much bad news coming from Stellantis, employee layoffs, models, and everything else. It's just a turbulent time right now. So congratulations to, again, Mopar Collector's Guide for their great job that they did. Now, you can find the links to all these stories and more at autoblog.com, MoparInsiders.com, and StellPower.com. Now, 1 year before I retired from full-time work, I decided I didn't need to be on LinkedIn anymore. So I quit there an hour before I retired from full-time work. Now, if you don't know what LinkedIn is put it simply, it's like a Facebook that concentrates on the business and corporate world. Now, after starting the podcast, I got myself back on LinkedIn again. It's in hopes of maybe getting more people to find out about the WaltPar Podcast. You got to do whatever you can. I don't have much money, so I'm trying to get out with what I can for free. Yeah, I know it sounds like I'm being a tightwad, but I'm just trying to get done with what I can. I don't know that much about how much rates go or anything as far as advertising, how to promote, how not to promote, and everything else. I am 70 years old. There are things I'm out of the loop on. I'm hoping to get back on the loop with. But I did join LinkedIn in hopes that would get me more listeners. Now, but one of the people I was able to connect with because of the reporting I've done previously on the social media channels with the news you just heard was David Zatz of StellPower. He accepted my LinkedIn connection. He also found out that once I got back on LinkedIn, I added that as an extra source to link those articles I find that you listen to and put those over onto LinkedIn. And if there's anything I can link or tag to, such as MoparInsiders.com and Autoblog, I also link or tag David Zatz on the articles that he writes. And he wrote me back. He emailed me at WaltParPodcast@AOL.com, and he wanted to tell me thanks for the tags. Now, when I told him about the WaltPar Podcast, he asked if we could get together. He says he's heard about the podcast in the past, which I appreciate that very much. And he thought maybe we'd like to get together and do an interview. Well, trust me, a small-time guy like me and a nationwide writer of books on Chrysler history, writing current articles on Chryslers and everything else, having him known nationwide, it was an honor, and such an honor to be able to talk with David. Such a nice person, great to talk to. This podcast is like a little over an hour. We could have talked for 2 or 3 hours. I mean, it was just a really fun conversation. I hope you'll find that out when you listen to it in just a minute here. David was one of the founders of WaltPar.com. He's currently no longer really a part of that, but he does currently write on his own website, Motales.com. He also has a YouTube channel for Motales, so check that out, where he does some historical stuff, historical items and the like. And he's also a partner with Patrick Rall, the Beard, at StellPower.com, and writes articles, and they both write articles on current things going on with Stellantis. So let's get this interview started. I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I enjoy doing this. Let's get started. Ladies and gentlemen, David A. Zatz. David Zatz, welcome to the WaltPar Podcast. It's an honor to have you here. I felt I've hit the big time. How you doing?
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and I'm impressed that you think this is the big time.
Well, a lot of people read your articles on Stellpower. They used to on WaltPar, and you also do Motales. Before we do that, tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, I've got an odd history for somebody who's doing Chrysler history as their main gig, so to speak, because I originally went to school to learn how to change organizations. So I took social and organizational psychology. We did organizational development, organizational change, research, that sort of thing. And I spent about 25 years actually doing all that in the field. So I worked with boards, I worked with executives, I worked with frontline people. We did all sorts of research and statistics, explored the entire service profit chain, so we linked employee factors to customer outcomes, to financial outcomes in various places, and it gives you an interesting appreciation for Chrysler, because Chrysler has been through just about every organizational change there is over time. They've had great days, they've had bad days. They've had numerous skunk works that reinvented the company. I mean, if you ever want to see a company reinvent itself over and over, that's Chrysler.
Amen.
They started out in 1904 as Maxwell Motors, and I think it took almost 10 years for them to go bankrupt after trying to, and they were the early mergers and acquisitions king. I can never remember his name, Billy Durant over at GM.
Yes.
And Mr. Briscoe, Benjamin Briscoe, over at the man who funded the creation of Maxwell Motors. The two of them got together and they thought, well, if we put together every automaker in the United States, the market would be a lot more stable. So they were going to make a single company that included every single manufacturer that was mass producing cars at that point. And they got together and they got them all into a room, and then the New York Times blew the whistle. I think Henry Ford probably leaked it because he wasn't really happy with giving up control of Ford.
Of course not.
It was a way for him to get his point of view across. And without his point of view getting across, how would people like Adolf Hitler have learned how things work in the world? So, or at least Henry Ford's view of it. So
yes.
When that all broke up, of course, Billy Durant went and he slowly assembled General Motors out of viable companies. And Benjamin Briscoe got a bunch of other companies that had no actual value and threw them together into U.S. Motor. Had a Byzantine structure where if you bought a car, the money went funneling through a dozen different places before it finally settled down. And they were bankrupt pretty quickly, and then Walter Flanders took over, replaced the Maxwell car with his own, changed the name to Maxwell, and kept on going. And then Walter Chrysler, of course, Walter Flanders, he was an older person already, and he had a major illness, and the company started to flounder. They called in Walter Chrysler, and the rest is history. But the first Chrysler was created by Skunk Works Project.
That was the Chrysler 6, correct?
The Chrysler 6. The actual name of it was the B70. And
Okay.
it was the B. This is fun, though, because the B was because it was the second Chrysler that was created by this group. The first one was supposed to have been made by Willis Overland in New Jersey, and they came awfully close. And then Willis wanted to take control. The story that I've heard is that Willis wanted to take back control of his company, so he diverted funds from that project and threw the whole thing into receivership. And he ended up with just the group in Toledo, which is what he wanted, and the group in New Jersey was auctioned off. But the first Chrysler was supposed to have been made. And I've gone back and read the New York Times stories from that era as it was happening, and it's a kind of a confusing episode in their history. There's an excellent book on Maxwell Motors. You can edit out a little pause, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I imagine you do an awful... I editing my own audio, it's pauses and ums and... No, wait, I'm going to say something else.
Absolutely.
Let's see. Here we go. Maxwell Motors and the Making of the Chrysler Corporation by Anthony J. Yannick. Excellent book put out, I believe, in 2009.
Okay.
But it really, it doesn't matter if it's an old book at this point because, hey, this doesn't change.
But
it really goes into the day-to-day of that in a deep way. It's a great way to get an idea of what happened because Chrysler just kept repeating itself where the company starts floundering. It starts wandering off. It risks bankruptcy or goes to bankruptcy. And then a strong outside leader comes in and takes over. And you see it again and again and again from, the next one is Walter Chrysler, obviously. Then they hire in Lynn Townsend at one point. Most people don't know him.
Oh, I remember him because, I was in elementary school, but I was a lover of Mopars when my dad showed me how to change the oil on his 1960 Dodge Seneca. First year for the Slant 6. And so I started loving Chrysler because my dad was good friends with the Dodge dealer in Worcester. His name was Walter Bates. And so I remember Lynn Townsend's name when you look through the pages of Motor Trend and like that.
Oh, right. Yes, they would have quoted him a lot.
Yes.
As the head of Chrysler for a long time, really.
Yes, he was. Yes.
And he also was in the tradition of great leaders of Chrysler who stayed on too long.
Yep. But I mean, they've had strong leaders and weak ones through the years. Like Bob Lutz was strong, Lee Iacocca was strong, and of course they had weak ones like Bob Nardelli, and I can't think of a few others, but they've had their ups and downs through the years.
Well, I like to think that very often the weak links and the strong leaders are the same people at different times. I mean, Lee Iacocca, I'm told it was after his wife died, but by the end, he wasn't all there as a leader of the company. And you could say the same about Walter Flanders, although that was due to illness. And Lynn Townsend, I'm not quite sure what was happening over time, but he seemed to sort of lose control of things as time went on.
Okay.
However, because otherwise Lee Iacocca would never have had to save the company.
That's
he wasn't
true.
Actually, Townsend wasn't actually running it at the time. His designated replacements were in charge, but the problems really had been there for a long time. You have things like the unstated policy that if GM and Ford don't have something, they're not going to have it either.
Why not?
Why not? We'll just take 12 to 15% of whatever GM and Ford do and we'll be happy. And then the next one, the corollary to that was we're going to match them car for car, truck for truck. And people within the company knew that this was crazy because Chrysler was not nearly as big as GM or Ford. They really couldn't spread themselves that wide.
Yep.
So they were thinking, maybe we should withdraw from certain segments where we don't really compete, although we say we do, and focus on the segments where we can be really strong and try to actually make money, for example, in the compact car class where they swung above their weight with the Valiant and the Dart and Duster.
Yep.
Demon.
But
anyway, yeah, it's a fascinating history with Chrysler Corporation, and even with Chrysler brand itself. I'm working on a book which is going to go up onto Indiegogo at some point soon when I'm done editing and start doing the typesetting. and it's just Chrysler. And I really never thought about in depth how Chrysler changed over the years as a brand, as a mark.
That's what I was going to ask you. You were talking about the brand because we used to talk about the corporation. Now all we do is talk about the brand. So, yeah, and there's a little side story on that, David. I collected 90% of the dealer brochures between 70 and 2000. And
where were you when I needed you?
and we were so used, Chrysler building the big cars. It's all they were going to build. It's all they advertised. We're just going to build nothing but big cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I first saw in 1975 the Dodge Charger SE. And I'm like thinking, well, this is a very good direction for Dodge to go with the Charger.
Mm-hmm.
So then what do you think automatically after that? Well, what's the Plymouth version going to be? Because the smaller cars were always Plymouths or Dodges. They were never Chryslers. So I picked up I saw the ad in the paper. I went to Bluffton University in Northwest Ohio, so it was the Findlay dealers ads in the newspaper, and they talked about the Cordoba, and then I finally picked up a brochure, and it's like, this thing's a Chrysler. And I would look at that front brochure. It's like a burgundy brochure outlining, and has the very front grill of it with those words Chrysler on it. And I must have looked at that for the longest time. I go, that's a Chrysler? It's like, wow. Yeah. And it just blew my mind. In fact, I bought one in 1977. I still own it today. But that just blew my mind. It was the first small Chrysler. But I just couldn't believe it was a Chrysler. You'd think it was going to be a Plymouth.
Yeah, well, the first small Chrysler since the 40s, but yes.
Yep.
Yeah, it was... Again, it's very interesting because if you go back far enough, if you go back to 1927, there they are making the old Maxwells, calling it the Chrysler 4-cylinder. I forget the actual model designation now, but they were making the old Maxwells under the Chrysler name, and they were making the Imperials under the Chrysler name. It was like looking at Chevrolet today. You start out with the Chevrolet Bolt. Well, I guess that today you don't, but if you start out last year, you're looking at the Bolt and maybe the Spark.
Yep.
And you go all the way up to the Corvette and the Suburban.
Yes.
It was a full-range company at that point, a full-range mark, full-range brand. And then 1928, it's like they took a hammer to it and it shattered. You suddenly have Dodge Brothers and DeSoto and Plymouth and Fargo and Chrysler. And then a few years later, you get Imperial as well. So it's really interesting how they sort of everything split off of it and then eventually came back so that now Chrysler is supposed to be a full-range mark, although they've only got one vehicle.
One thing I want to go back on just for the sake of the listeners, Fargo was a truck that was not made in the USA. It was a Dodge truck with different nameplates on it. And I remember in 1969, Fargo trucks were sold by Chrysler Plymouth dealers in Canada, while Dodge trucks were sold by Dodge dealers in Canada. And then when they quit making the Fargos, then all Chrysler Plymouth and Dodge dealers sold Dodge trucks. But people may not know what Fargo was. DeSoto ended in 1961, although their name lived on in other countries. Am I correct?
Well, Fargo's name, as far as I know, is still sold in Turkey, but it's attached to completely different vehicles. I think they still have DeSoto in Turkey, too.
Yes. It's a really square-looking, off-the-mark truck, but yes. I remember seeing a picture of that.
I used to know who made those.
What?
I used to know who made those, and I've forgotten, but the thing is that Fargo was actually used in the United States, and the theory was that it was there to pressure Dodge Brothers into selling more cheaply.
Okay.
So they actually, and I found some evidence for that recently, Walter Chrysler's salesperson actually sent agents out all over the country to convince the Dodge Brothers dealers, whether they sold cars or trucks, to sign up with DeSoto and with Fargo. And then, of course, once they bought Dodge Brothers, they had to send people back into the field to convince them to go back to selling Dodge Brothers again.
Gotcha.
So it was a cunning plan, but the people who owned Dodge Brothers weren't the Dodge Brothers then, because they had both died years before. It was bankers. So I guess all's fair in love and war.
Yes, exactly. So you've delved into this history. What books have you written through the years? Well, first off, before we go any further, what got you interested in Chrysler Corporation and the brands?
I can tell you the truth, and it's mostly to do with my social set in high school, where I ended up just sort of falling into the gearheads in my junior and senior year in high school. And they were more Mopar people than anything else. So I heard the legends of Mopar, which we now know are not in any way true.
Yep.
Things like, do you remember the 426 Hemi? When they went to net horsepower, it was still 425 horsepower. And since you have the brochure for it, you know, no, it wasn't. It was 370. They did downrate it.
Yes.
But, you know, there were all these myths and legends, and then there are the oddball things like the Monteverdi. But mainly what held my interest, and then it was the engineering, too, of the cars. I mean, these were clearly engineering-first cars in many subtle and interesting ways. The first ones with the electronic ignition.
Yes.
And that system really worked, but, of course, you had to know more about the car to actually use it, because what would fail is the ballast resistor. It's $2. Back then.
I had a couple of those fail on the Cordova through the years.
Exactly. They might be up to $4 now. I don't know how much they really cost anymore, but you know, and it's a 2-minute job to replace it. And if you don't have anything to unbolt them with, you can just take the electrical connection, you know, unplug the old one, plug in the new one, find a place to sit it underneath the dashboard, start the car, and there you go.
Well, on mine, it's in the firewall area, so you just unplug the plugs and put it in and worry about bolting it in later. You still had plenty of clearance from the engine.
Exactly. It's always mounted by the firewall. And discovering this was really funny, because as I drove around back and forth, you know, in the early 80s, I would see stranded people in Plymouths and Dodges and Chryslers, and I'd pull over, and I'd say, so what you doing? And they'd say, well, I'm waiting for a tow truck. It's like, here, try this. And they'd try it, and the car would invariably start. And I can't tell you how many people gave me $20 because it was better than waiting for a tow truck and giving them $50.
And yeah, I was going to say it was still going to be cheaper. And I remember how you think you're so close to getting it fired, and then it wouldn't. And that's how it was. But yeah, that was the problem with them. I remember one time, you know, you saw the commercial in 1973 with Arthur Godfrey where they're putting all these fire hoses on the engine of a 73 Satellite. And they're
you saw that.
Oh, yeah, pouring water on that thing, and it fired right up. So I had to go through some flooded water. I'm like thinking, in the Cordova, okay, I got electronic ignition. I'll just fly right through it. Nope, she started flooding up. So I got it out of the water and was able to clear it out and then go on my way. But it wasn't exactly like when the fire hoses were hitting it, and it was starting to quit running. But it got through, and I got through okay, and it kept on running. So, but that's a little fun tale there. So you got your interest in that electronic ignitions, and then there's other things. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But keep in mind that this was a different era for me than it was for you when you were at that age.
Yes.
Because for me, what was happening at that point, you know, I graduated from high school in the early 80s, not to be too specific.
Yep.
But, you know, I went to the dealership, and I was expecting to see all these cars that my friends were talking about. And, of course, what do they have there? Plymouth Reliance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Chrysler LeBaron K's, Reliant K's, Airy K's, and all of a sudden the sporty LeBaron became a luxury four-door.
Yeah, and the word luxury requires quite a stretch when you're using it there. I mean,
yes.
Still, when you're in one of those, at the time, my first ride in a Reliant, I was stunned because, you know, I had a Valiant.
Mm-hmm.
And the Reliant, it's so quiet, so smooth compared to the Valiant. And I'll tell you that four-cylinder can, it beats the crap out of the the slant six, and it's kind of more on par with the 318 almost. So, for all the complaints about the horsepower dropping, you have to consider that the weight also dropped.
Yes.
So
big time.
Big time. And the 2.2 was designed to have a high output for its size, whereas the 318 was designed to pull a truck up a steep hill for about 10 years.
Yes.
Slight design philosophy difference. And one of the things that's been nice about running WaltPar. So I should point out the reason why I'm here in the first place is almost certainly not because I wrote a few books, but because of WaltPar, which was, I started that site, I can't remember when I started it. It was 93 or 94. It was basically not long after the internet, the World Wide Web was created.
It was one of the first websites I used to see, yes.
It was very, very early, and according to the useless sites page, which has not been around for a while, but which I found on archive.org, the useless sites page had the predecessor of WaltPar, Dave's Valiant pages there, and it had the legend, what could be more useless than a site about cars?
They were wrong.
They were wrong, but, possibly I had the first site about cars. Probably not, but maybe. Probably not.
You were very close. I slightly remember Dave's Valiant page, too.
Oh, gosh. That's amazing. That's a good memory.
And another early site I remembered was a college professor, either somewhere down south from Virginia on down, started the Swepline page.
Oh, I remember that.
All about 61 to 71 Dodges.
Yeah, that was a nice site.
Of course, unless you were in Brazil, then they lasted through 79. And in Argentina, the DD series lasted till 81. So,
yeah. Well, that's like the Valiant, isn't it? Last one made in 81 or 82.
Right.
Even though here they left in 76. And, of course, the name, at least the Dart name, continued into the K cars, as I recall, very vaguely, and I could be wrong.
Well,
but yeah, it was. But WaltPar, it's like when I started doing that, I just got in tune with a lot more people who knew a lot more, and I learned a lot. And then all the corporate stuff going on, that was just as I was starting to write. Gosh, I wasn't even writing about cars for WaltPar. WaltPar wasn't there yet. I was starting to write a couple of articles for trade magazines comparing different cars, comparative reviews for things like small pickup trucks. And so I got onto Chrysler's press release list, and they sent me the advance information on the Intrepid, the LH series.
Yes, 1993.
Wow. In 1993, and that was the first press kit I think that they had ever done, which went into how the cars were developed, and this, of course, dovetailed with my work in organizational design and organizational culture. So it was just fascinating to me, and it gave a whole new dimension to it. So I'm not, if it was just about the cars, maybe I would have stayed with it, maybe I wouldn't. I don't know. But having the cars and the company, and what a company, at that time together, it was, GM had nothing and Ford, they had nothing in comparison. And, of course, the other thing about Chrysler is their history is truly illustrious. They invented the modern car with the airflow. They invented the high-performance engine with the original Chrysler 6.
Yes, they did. I think it might have been something you wrote or somebody wrote. It was you, because you were talking about the 100-year anniversary of the Chrysler Corporation, period, which started with the Chrysler brand, and how the Chrysler 6 was that car and one other from Europe were the only two cars in the world that you could buy production cars that would go 70 mile an hour.
Yep. Well, it turns out that there was also another American one, the Packard 8.
That's what it was. It wasn't a European car. It was the Packard 8. That's what it was, yes.
Right. Right, the Packard 8, and it only cost twice as much. Well, I'm taking that from memory. Don't quote me. But yeah, the Packard 8 was a much more expensive car, and it was a true luxury car.
Yes.
Whereas the Chrysler was a luxury car in performance and in ride and handling and in braking, but it was more mainstream in the body and, how it looked. But you could also buy it. I mean, an ordinary person could easily buy a Chrysler, whereas a Packard might be out of reach.
And up until recently, probably, let me think now. That would be probably, well, actually, through the late 70s, I would say Chrysler has been like a higher up car for the masses.
Yeah, I would say that was true through about 2001 when Plymouth was folded into it.
Okay, I'll go. Yes, I'll agree with that. Absolutely, yes.
I mean, we're going to pretend that the K-base LeBaron and the AA LeBaron didn't exist.
Right. Yeah, the AA LeBaron. For people that don't know, that's the Chrysler version of the Dodge Spirit and Plymouth Acclaim.
Right. Now, a very nice car. But I thought it was funny. There's a story that I have in the book, which I haven't finished writing yet, about Chrysler, where when we went to the airport at one point, we had the limo service come by, and most of our cars were Lincoln Town cars, and I really didn't look forward to being in one of those because with the fleet rear seats, you ended up just sliding back and forth, and the seat belts never worked. And they showed up in the Plymouth Acclaim.
There you go.
And I asked, yep, bingo. And I asked about it, and the driver said, well, we keep this for when all the Lincolns are in the shop. Because, it's obviously not a luxury car. It's not even a Chrysler LeBaron, for heaven's sake. It's just a Plymouth Acclaim. But the guy said, personally, I find that I prefer driving it, and most people prefer riding in it because it's quieter than the Lincolns, and it has nicer back seats.
That AA body was a very solid car.
It could be very plush. If you got the Plymouth or the Chrysler, they had the nice soft suspension. The Dodge was a little firmer, and I had a Spirit RT, so that was kind of a beast unto its own.
Yes, and
yes,
I just had a friend of mine just buy one with a Turbo 3 in it.
That's it,
with a 5-speed.
Yeah,
and he just got that car. It's gorgeous. It is gorgeous.
It's a lot of fun if you want to race Camaros and Mustangs of the same era at traffic lights because they'll never see anything but your rear tail lights.
I know, and they don't believe it when it's just a 4-cylinder. Wrong.
It is. It is just a 4-cylinder. I mean, that's honest. Like a Porsche, many Porsches were just 4-cylinders too.
Yes, exactly. But if it's an American car, they think it's got to be a V8 to go fast. It's like, no. There is a Plymouth Voyager. It's like an 89 standard.
Oh, the Gus Mann car, right?
Yes, it goes 12 seconds. And, so if a minivan can do that with a 4-cylinder, the sky's the limit. Now, with the thing about Chrysler in general, what I've noticed through the years before you, since I'm 10 or 11 years older than you, is Chrysler would always be complained about, oh, how they're terrible at this. Oh, how they're terrible at that. Oh, I don't like this about it. I don't like that about it. I was in a repair shop the other day. They were working on a Chevrolet starting problem for a hot rod. Guess what they were going to put in it to get it to start? A Chevrolet designed version of a gear reduction starter. And as I was growing up, people go, oh, those Chrysler products, they have those tinny sounding starters. I don't like that at all. That doesn't sound solid. I think I may have replaced 2 of those in my lifetime.
Yeah, the starters tended not to break. The alternators, some of them I could, they lasted a good long time. You can't complain about that.
Right.
What was it that broke? Ball joints. But yeah, it's always worse on the other side, I notice. Our owners complain more.
They do.
But they also expect things. You ever notice back in the day how many owners didn't put air filters in?
I know.
I mean, what the heck was that about? An air filter cost, $2 at the time?
Yep.
It was the cheapest part you could get, and it protects your engine. Kind of nice to have. And all the time I'd see them without any air cleaner at all. And it's
They
like,
were so easy to replace, David.
and it was a Chrysler invention.
Yes.
It was a Chrysler exclusive.
I mean,
replaceable element air filter.
yeah, Chrysler was the first to come out with power steering. I
Yep.
don't think they were the first with air conditioning, but they were the ones that started making it more mass marketable in more cars.
They also were the first with the modern building air conditioner, although that's, doesn't really help you in your car at all.
Right. And I'll never forget, Chrysler redesigned their dashboards. The darts didn't, the A-bodies didn't, but the other cars, they redesigned the dashboards to have a single hole put in, and the radio was part of the faceplate. And people would complain because back then they were starting to come out with in-dash stereos. Used to be stereos were bolted underneath the dash on the bottom of the dashboard. Then they were starting to come out with aftermarket in-dash stereos, but you had to have a flat piece or they would work through the holes that are automatically there from the old radio. And people would complain about Chrysler products because, they got to leave those big holes and you can't put your own stereo in. So in 1982, GM went from worst to first in stereos. I mean, it used to be the radio, all you could do is balance the stereo front to rear, no left to right on the old radios. In 1982, and it wasn't out in all models, it came out later, they had a fantastic stereo, full balance and everything. But guess what? It had the hole in the wall. It was a one-piece unit, just like a Chrysler, but yet people bitched about the Chrysler, but they didn't care about the GM if that did it.
Yeah. Well, it's similar for a lot of things today. It's like, you read all those newspaper stories, Apple treats its workers terribly, which, okay, that's fair.
Yep.
Although they're, in China and they work for a different company, it's still fair. But then look at any other manufacturer and you say, oh, look, it's worse if you buy something from anyone else. But, it's a target, and it's a target that won't fight back usually. So
there you go.
However, we should mention here, because we brought up Chrysler and new things, and one of the funny things is that they were working on minivans at about the time that you started getting into cars, with the first drawings done in 72 and 73.
That long
and
ago.
Then, that long ago, and most people don't know this. People keep repeating the story that Lee Iacocca must have brought them from Ford, because Ford had a minivan project. They started in 73. But, it's great minds think alike. What is it? There will be steam engines when it's steam engine time.
Yep.
That theory of history. And it was sort of like that, where all three of the automakers started working on minivans, and nobody approved them. Iacocca himself shot down the one at Ford, which it probably wasn't that practical as he was shown it. And yet at Chrysler, they were working on it years and years and years. And in my book, Mopar Minivans, I've got pictures of the original styling bucks. The clay models, and they would have just a lifelike picture of the side of the vehicle. And they would use it for comparisons to other vehicles. They had the silhouette, and I have a picture of it in the book, where it's leaning up against the B-van silhouette so that you can see how much smaller it is.
Yes.
You look at it on its own, you can't tell that it's a minivan.
Exactly.
They didn't call it that. They called it a magic van. But it was really kind of interesting how it kept getting rejected, because, of course, GM and Ford weren't making them, so why should we? And then the Omni and Horizon came to the United States. And so they now suddenly had a front-wheel drive, independent suspension chassis, and they were working on an engine that would work with them. Because, you think about the minivan, if they made it in 1976, how would they have made it? Would have had a slant six engine, putting out your whole 100 or so horsepower. You
Yep.
would have had a 3-speed automatic. Well, they ended up with 3-speed automatics anyway. But you would have had rear-wheel drive. It would have been like a Ford Aerostar.
Yes, or a GMC Safari Chevrolet Astro.
Exactly. If it was lucky, it would have been like that because those cars also had V6 engines. So, how do you deal with the engine? You can't transverse mount it in the front. It would have either had to have a long hood or it would have had to stick out into the car like the old A-Vans did. And then what do you have? Basically, you have an A-Van with, you have an A-Van with seats.
Yes, yes. Now, let me ask you this. Since we're going back in history, they started the minivan back in the 72. During the 70s, as I was growing up, and now I can look back at history, gas prices tripled. They went from like the 30s to $1. They had to hit that dollar goal around 1980.
When you could buy gas.
Yes. And the thing is, David, Chrysler Corporation didn't do much. I mean, GM had the Vega, Ford had the Pinto. I'm not saying they're great automobiles, but it was a start.
They were trying. They brought out the Cricket, which was from their Hillman group in England.
Yes, and Colts had the Mitsubishis.
Like an Opel Kadett. Yeah, it's and they had the Mitsubishis, and they were buying into Mitsubishi. So the plan was that they would own Mitsubishi before very much time. The Mitsubishi complex. Mitsubishi, we talk about Mitsubishi and we refer to the car company, but Mitsubishi is a massive keiretsu of different companies.
They make airplane engines, I think.
They make airplane engines. I think they make whole airplanes. It's like you look at Hyundai. We talk about Hyundai like they're a car maker, and that's their big business. But they also make cargo ships. They make super tankers.
Oh, they make electric heaters.
Appliances. They make electric heaters. Thank you. And Mitsubishi is the same. I mean, what's the world leader in split system air conditioners? It's Mitsubishi.
Yes.
So they are basically what they're like Chrysler was in 1960, only much more so. They're this huge complex. And the automaker part was seen as, at first, I think it was seen as an opportunity, and then it was seen as a prestige play, and then it was seen as there's this great big boat anchor around our profits. So they were quite happy to sell it to Chrysler.
Yep.
But Chrysler ended up not having enough money to buy it.
Right. Now,
Chrysler was also supposedly going to buy Mercedes at one point. I've never really found much evidence for that, but that's what people say.
Well, as they went through the 70s, at least GM and Ford, more GM than Ford, they were able to come out, General Motors, with like the Chevrolet Monza, the Pontiac, I forget. Cars like that. They kept building the small stuff. Chrysler itself, without Mitsubishi, they weren't changing a thing. They were still building the same stuff the entire time.
They did pretty up the Valiant. They had the Valiant Brougham for people who were downsizing from Chrysler or a high-level Dodge.
Right, and they had the Dart Special Edition.
But keep in mind, the product planning group, at that point, there were people there who knew better, but there were also the executives, and they were not willing to spend on small cars, which had never been profitable.
True.
And, and they thought bringing the Cricket over would work, which it could have if they had tried to Americanize the Cricket. And I think part of what they learned with the Horizon was you can't just take something from England and sell it here without changing anything. And in any case, as soon as the new emissions controls came in, the Cricket couldn't meet them, and so it had to go away. I think, 72, 73, I can't remember.
71, 73 was the last year for the Cricket.
All right, so 74, it wasn't allowed in because of the Clean Air Act starting to ever so slowly take effect. So that was why they couldn't why they didn't make something domestically. I don't think they had the resources. I don't think they had the money.
Yeah, and so I thought that pretty much sunk Chrysler a little bit. They were starting to really pick up good on trucks in the 70s. The Cordoba was a lifesaver for the cars. That one sold well. The other ones were sort of mediocre, and when 1980 came around, it was pretty much sunk for a while, and then of course the government loan fiasco went on and everything. My question for you is, when did they start research on the Omni and Horizon?
Oh, the dates. I don't have the dates in my memory. I have them written down in many places. But the Omni and Horizon were already in progress in Europe when the American group got involved. And I would guess 74 or so, 75 maybe. But I'm just guessing. I find it hard to remember dates. But I can remember the order of things was that they were rebuilt. They were doing a new generation of the Simca 1100. And this was a revolutionary car in that it was the first one in the world with that front-wheel drive, transverse-mounted engine, hatchback design that Volkswagen copied so well in their Golf and Rabbit.
Yes.
And Volkswagen did copy it. And the amusing thing is, of course, that Volkswagen's arrived here, I think, 75, 76?
With the Rabbit, yes.
The Rabbit arrived before the Omni and Horizon did.
Yep.
So people thought that the Omni and Horizon were imitating the Rabbit, but they were just the second generation of the car that the Rabbit was imitating.
And I thought that myself, too, at first.
Yeah, I mean, me too. I mean, it looked obvious. But it was kind of funny because the styling for it was done before the Rabbit was out, before the Golf was out, I should say. Because, this is the only place it was a Rabbit. But in England, basically Chrysler Europe was centralized in the early 70s. So they had their French and their English engineering divisions, and then they had Barreros in Spain, but that never really got mixed in with anything else. So they started working with Simca and Roots Group, renamed them both Chrysler England, Chrysler France, and they looked at the engineering for this new car, and they assigned the engineering of it to France, which was smart because they had the front-wheel drive design that was the future at that point, and the English got to style it.
Now, for people that may not know this, if you want to ever look this up as we're talking, Simca is SIMCA. They were part of Chrysler. Even back in the middle to late 60s it started. I remember reading articles about that in Motor Trend. And Roots is spelled Rootes, not just, you got to put that E between the T and the S. And that was the Roots company.
Yeah, very confusing with the Roots supercharger being completely unrelated.
Yep. Now that I never heard of before was the Roots supercharger, but
spelled without an E.
Without the E, okay.
Without the E, but yeah, it was an interesting company. It was made up by a guy who was basically a really good car salesman, and he went around buying car companies in England and doing really screwy things with them that didn't make a whole lot of sense in retrospect. And by the time Chrysler got there, the whole thing was in collapse.
Didn't they have a part with Sunbeam?
They did. They had Sunbeam, Humber, which was a very high-end car, Hillman, and Singer. They might have had one or two others who I don't remember. They also owned the name for Talbot or Talbot, your choice. I don't know how to pronounce it honestly, but it's Talbot or Talbot, depending on what you.
That one I never heard of. Yeah. Now, the Hillman, the Cricket was based after the Hillman Avenger.
Yep, and then they had a Humber. They always had a Humber based on the Hillman, and the difference was that the Humber had real wood fittings and a 6-cylinder engine. The Hillman had a 4-cylinder engine and whatever cheap stuff they could nail onto the interior.
And then through the 70s, as I've been intrigued with the Brazilian Chargers.
The old
the swinger
those
body,
were the Valiant-based ones, right?
Yes,
not the. Yeah, but they also made the. Was it the Dodge 1500, which was the Hillman Avenger, sold by Dodge in
they
South
later
America.
called the Polara.
And the Dodge Polara, but they kept the 1500. They had different versions, and then Volkswagen bought it and kept selling them as the Volkswagen 1500, complete with the Chrysler emblem.
Yes, Volkswagen bought Chrysler in Brazil in 80 or 81.
Yeah, that's a good memory for dates. I
But
should consult you more often.
well, thank you, sir. But yeah. So the thing is, I think what people maybe thought that the Omni and Horizon were Volkswagens to begin with was the standard engine was from Volkswagen.
Oh, right, yes, because because they didn't have their 2-liter engine ready yet.
The 2.2 wasn't ready yet,
liter,
and
right.
and it was right there, plain as day. Because I had an 80 the 2-door Omni. You open up the hood, and right there at the top left of the block, you see a VW sign.
And you know why they weren't doing the Peugeot engine was because the engine that they actually sold in the car in Europe, in the European Omni, I'm pretty sure couldn't meet American emissions. So they couldn't sell the Peugeot engine.
Well, they did in 83.
They sold a different Peugeot engine, I'm told.
Yeah, 1.6 liter.
Right, but I'm told that wasn't actually available in the in the Horizon in Europe, which is kind of funny, but I don't know if it's true.
I had a friend of mine.
That's the latest.
Had a friend of mine, when I asked him, I said, how good are those Peugeot 1.6s that replace those Volkswagen engines? And he says, you know how fast your Omni 024 is? I go, yeah, it isn't. He goes, well, that Omni will run circles around this engine.
They were not good.
They were not good
They were
at
not
all.
good. And the Volkswagen engines were funny, too, because they were, I think, stroked. I think they were stroked a little for Chrysler. And then Chrysler had their own controls on it, so it wasn't really it was a Volkswagen block, but it wasn't all Volkswagen.
Yes.
It was a mix. But yeah, the 2.2 couldn't come early enough.
Oh, amen to that. And when it did, it hit. The only problem I saw they had was the cylinders were very close to each other, so sometimes it would eat up a head gasket every once in a while. But other than that, they were a very durable engine. Then came along the turbos in 84, along with fuel injection on some of them. And I had an 87 Lancer ES with a turbo with a 5-speed.
That's the perfect combination.
And that was my second best mechanical car I owned. Fit and trim were terrible.
Amazing.
Paint and mechanics were just out of this world. And
No, I had a friend with a LeBaron GTS. That was a 5-speed and a turbo, 2.5 turbo, and I drove that car. It had something like 160,000 miles on it, and it felt brand new. It was so different from the one Dodge Dynasty I ever drove.
Oh, yeah.
Which felt like every single bolt and nut and piece of metal was completely worn out at half that age.
Yes.
He couldn't believe it was from the same company from roughly the same time.
Yep. So tell me, David, what books do you have out that people could buy?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, the first one, hold on a second, I need a reference because the Jeep one has a funny name. The best one, in my opinion, and this will sound silly, is the minivan book, Mopar Minivans. And that has been out for a while. It's in the second edition now. And I wasn't going to... The second edition is actually the fourth edition, don't ask. But Mopar Minivan's second edition has a whole bunch of stuff on the newer ones, as well as the newer upgrades. So I always had the development story. Then I got more pictures in the second version of the book. And then there's a lot more on each individual generation after that. Hold on a second. I have to log in and look at my own website to see.
How late, what body code are you up to on that then?
I get up to the Pacifica, and I think it ends in 2022 because that's when it was written.
So you go all the way up to the RU body then?
Right. I go all the way up to basically where we are today.
Okay, yeah.
So that's fun, and that covers 1972 to 2022 is what I say on that one.
50 years.
50 years, and that is actually the one I've sold the most of, believe it or not. Number 2 is Dodge Viper, the full story of the world's first V10 sports car. That came out in 2020, so I was able to get every one of them in. And I did get some help from, what the heck is his name? hold on a second. Names and dates, things I'm not good at.
That's why we
you
have
remember
all
the
our
name of the
friends to
guy?
come back on.
That's right. It does help. My wife's gotten very good with names and dates as a result of this. Let me just type in Viper book and see. Thinking it's Roy something or other. I might not be able to give him a shout out because if you put in Viper book, you don't get a lot in Amazon. You get a lot of really crappy romance thrillers, but you don't really get a lot of books about Dodge Vipers.
I can see that. Yep.
Maybe Dodge. There's a whole series apparently of Viper Vixens. Viper book. If I put in Dodge, that might help. Oh, it probably isn't even in here. Oh, here we go. Maurice Liang.
Okay.
He wrote this. He wrote some excellent Viper books, and he was actually an embedded journalist in one of the generations of Viper. And he was very nice because he gave me some help while I was writing it. He gave me some help after I wrote it, and I went to him for some of the corrections for the paperback. So we sold out the hardcover, and then there was a paperback printing. And when the paperbacks are all used up, it'll go to print on demand. And that's done through Veloci in England, which has been interesting because if you ever have to deposit English checks in the United States, you find out two things. First, that you shouldn't. And second, that banks charge you an inordinate amount of cash to do it. And when they do, they won't tell you how much it is. They'll just give you a vague range, which it could be, and say, we're really trying, but we just don't know.
Wow.
So that was an interesting experience, but they did an incredible job of layout on the book, and they're very nice to work with.
Now, are these books available?
Well, the Viper book is available pretty much anywhere. It's on Amazon. It's on Veloci, and it is available via bookstores, usually if you order it.
Okay.
You have to pretty much order it because it's not exactly... it got very good reviews, which is interesting. And if you do order it from Amazon, definitely I suggest getting the paperback because there are parts that are more accurate. On the other hand, if you get the hardcover, the stories are more interesting because they are written without the help of one of the engineers who was very specific in the wording that we had on the changes.
Yes, okay.
So we ended up being very precise, but not very fun in some places. But there are a lot of fun stories because this is a Chrysler car.
Yep.
So it was made on a definite budget, and it's a Skunk Works car, which means that there was a small, tight, cohesive group that broke rules and worked together and did all sorts of crazy things because they had to get it done, just like with the original minivan and then the when they remade the minivan for 1996.
That would be the NS body.
The NS body, thank you. It's kind of funny. If you look at the minivan, the first one is really parts bin. It's how much of this can we steal out of the Reliant? How many parts in this car have the same part number as they would in a Reliant, like the door panels and the dashboard and stuff like that? As much as possible, they had to take from stuff that already existed. Same as the Viper, by the way. One of the things that I thought was funny was that they were looking at side lights or some such for the Viper, and they finally found what they wanted at a trailer house. And they had to write to the manufacturer to get the part changed ever so slightly to be street legal on a regular car. But it's parts bin as much as you can because we don't have the money for it. So they come out with this vehicle. Did you ever drive an original minivan, the first gen?
Yes, I did, because my dad bought one for the insurance company back in 1984 when they first came out. It was a Caravan LE 5-passenger. He did not order the second bench seat in the back, and it was a 2.6 automatic, and he could not get a tape player back then, so the dealership had one from an 83 and stuck in it. But yes,
funny.
And that van lasted a long time.
I take it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it's probably a Chrysler because it has a silver face to it.
Oh, yeah, that makes more sense because it probably wasn't available in a Reliant either.
Yep.
If it wasn't in a minivan. Right. So, well, I had an 87 turbo van with a automatic, unfortunately. And the difference between that and the 91, you will recall, is quite severe. And you wouldn't know that they were made by the same company, much less that they basically had the exact same body, but they had money in 91 and time.
Yes.
So they were able to do things like really retune the suspension, put in sound insulation, put in a unique dedicated dashboard that's just for minivans. So the 91 is basically, yeah, here we are, and we were able to really pay attention to it, and we had some money. And then 96 is, and we're doing it completely differently. And the story that's always told about the 96 is it took them a very, very long time before they could make it better than the 91.
You know, here's a funny thing. You know, you mentioned parts bins, and I can give you all kinds of stories looking through those Crest. Have you ever seen the Crestline books?
Yes.
Those books are amazing, and
nice.
I mean, I could go through like with the trucks and all that. With the parts bins, let me see, where was I going to go with this? I think 92, you might have been talking about, not 91, was when they restyled the NS body.
Am I?
Or the AS body. They did.
Right.
All right. Oh, here's what I was going to say. Coming from the parts bin, the RS body, they offered these totes that would fit into the stow and go area.
I remember those. They were expensive.
Yeah, but I got them for mine, and I got them for my 14 RT. But here's the funny thing: like, I didn't have them. I bought the 06 minivan, and I got the totes for it. And then when it came to 14, I go, well, let's see what the different part number would be in the accessory book for the totes. They're the same totes. So even though they redesigned from the RS to the RT body in 08, the flooring was the exact same.
Oh, that's funny. Well, the RT body, the original RT body that came out in 08, that was such we're cheap SOBs. We don't want to spend any money.
And it was, and the dashboard and that big shifter was terrible.
Oh, yeah. Well, the shifter they copied from Toyota, so at least you could say it was no worse than Toyota had. But
there you go.
It was an odd choice. But mostly the thing that annoyed me was they came out with it, and it had the exact same suspension for the Dodge and the Chrysler, and it had no short wheelbase.
Yep.
And, you look at it, and everything about it screamed, I'm trying to save money.
Exactly.
Just like on the PT Cruiser. It's like you look at the original PT and then they redesign it and you say, well, what did they do in the redesign? Well, they got rid of the teardrop headlights that everybody loved, and then they cheapened as much as they possibly could. So
yes.
Nobody was sad, I think, that Daimler sold out to Cerberus. People were sad that they sold to Cerberus instead of Magna.
Yes, I was wondering that about that. And also, back in the bankruptcy days of the late 70s, it was rumored that Volkswagen was going to buy Chrysler.
Yeah, I don't remember those rumors.
It was a rumor. It wasn't really a fact that it was coming. But
keep in mind, I was in high school. So,
yes, and that was like a rumor for it, just as all the pundits were talking as a way out to save Chrysler. Was maybe Volkswagen
fortunately
could buy
wasn't needed, but I can see why
yes.
from the outside, not knowing about the Reliant, it's just like, ups and downs. It's just like a few years later, there they are stalling out. Yeah, Coca kind of outlived his period of maximum effectiveness, shall we say.
Yes, I agree with that.
And he's there, and the company's starting to go down, and people are talking about Chrysler going bankrupt again. And I bought some stock. The first stock I ever bought through Charles Schwab at something like $3.50 a share. I bought maybe $150 worth. It was a lot of money for me at that point.
Yep.
And then the New York Times did the article on the LH cars. and I sold my stock for about $10 a share. My dad kept his a few extra weeks. He sold it for 24.
Wow. Well, yeah, the LH was the comeback because everything else was K-car based, and he was sort of old-fashioned in his styling because of cars like the AY body, Fifth Avenue and Imperial.
Oh yeah, and he
Long
always felt
white
that they needed an Imperial and a convertible, and a coupe. And it turns out you really don't need at least two of those, probably all three.
Yep. Yes.
I mean, he had calcified, but I think that, well, people said it was because his wife died, and I'm willing to believe it. And he got distracted by the Statue of Liberty, and people were talking about him running for president. And I think he got very busy doing rich CEO stuff.
Yeah, he was pretty instrumental in preserving the Statue of Liberty.
He was. He did an amazing job of that, like he's done an amazing job of so many other things. So it's like with Lee, you have to say, on the one hand, you got to kind of hate him for Bob Eden and for trying to take over the company again, which drove them into the arms of Daimler. But on the other hand, you got to love him because he rescued Chrysler in the first place.
Yes, he did.
He was exactly what they needed at the time. Really, above all else, they needed somebody who was confident and would make decisions. And was willing to go where GM had not gone. And he was confident, and he made decisions. And half of them were complete losers. You know, he didn't bat 1,000. But it doesn't matter because the other half were winners. The convertible, nobody expected a convertible to sell in those days. Convertibles were already dead. And the minivan,
yes,
which all he had to do was approve, but, you know, he was clever. He had to approve it, and then he had to hide it from the government people.
Mm-hmm.
Because they weren't supposed to be making a minivan. That's chancy. So he pretended he hid the whole budget for it in the Reliant station wagon. So that should tell you what they had to go through to make the minivan.
Yes, yes. Yeah. Oh, now I forgot what I was going to say, but
there's two other books. You could go into those.
Okay.
One of them, and of course, by the way, let's see. The Veloci book is still out there, and one of them is from Ertl. This was originally done under a different imprint, but the owner of it passed on, and he sold to Ertl. And that is called, and I need to take a long breath, Wagoneer, Gladiator, Comanche, and Scrambler, Jeeps Go Anywhere Vehicles. And I've always felt that title really restricts sales. But that was his idea. I wish I could remember his name. I say that a lot, I know. But,
and for people listening, the Gladiator that David is talking about is the pickup truck, the full-size Jeep pickup truck that was built till about 93.
Oh, that's right. That was the original Gladiator, and it was essentially the same. It was co-engineered with the original Jeep Wagoneer, and they looked extremely similar.
Yes, especially in the front end and the windshield, yes.
Yes. They were pretty revolutionary when they first came out, and you can see Wagoneers in TV and movies quite a lot. My first Wagoneer that I ever remember seeing, I knew a guy in school, and I helped him out with a few things on the computer. And one day he said, "Hey, you want to come down to my house? And, you know, I got a couple of things to look at." And I said, okay. And went down there. And he lives in this little mansion in the woods of southern New Jersey. Turns out his dad was the president of Fram.
Wow, okay.
So, and there was his dad's old Wagoneer, and he said, "I want you to look at this." And so he takes the door, and the door opens up, and it goes creak, and there's a sound like sloshing, and he said, "What do you suppose that is?" So I asked him for a screwdriver, and I poked through one of the water holes at the bottom.
There you go.
10 gallons of water comes gushing out.
There you go. It's fixed.
I don't know if that's the right way to do it, but it's the way I did it because I didn't know then as much as I know now.
In other words,
my younger self was surprisingly ignorant.
Yeah, another way to describe the Wagoneer was the Suburbans back in the day were based off the pickup trucks from GM.
Oh, right, yes.
And the Wagoneer was based off the pretty much the same way as the Gladiator truck.
I think the main difference is that they co-developed them, and the Wagoneer was really the primary vehicle, and the truck was secondary because of what Jeep was at that time. So they were replacing a Jeep wagon with this, a bigger Jeep wagon.
Yes.
And the pickup truck was sort of a, add-on, just like the Suburban until a few years ago, well, a few decades ago, would be the add-on to a Chevy pickup.
Right. Well,
But
Willie's Jeep had a pickup truck, and then they had a
Yep.
wagon version of that same truck, so it carried over when they restyled, if I'm not mistaken.
Keeping in mind, that Willis had almost no budget for anything.
Right.
They didn't have in-house design staff. They hired outsiders, usually the same outsider, to style everything, and they had to make do with a very small budget. So one of the things that's great about that is that at American Motors later on, which didn't exist, let me think, American Motors did exist, I think, when this came out, but they didn't own Jeep yet. It was still owned by Chrysler.
Yeah, I think it was sometime in the middle 60s at AMC. No, 70.
63.
What?
60. Oh, yeah, AMC in the 70s, right. But,
72 or
the
3,
Wagoneer,
I think
63.
it is.
Yeah. But, Kaiser was a funny company because it came out because the guy who did the Liberty ships, that was the Kaiser that we're talking about. And he said, whoever starts making cars first is going to clean up. So he shifted everything he could, and he ended up designing and building a car just after the war ended. So he was the first one out with new cars, and then once the big three caught up and they got their production running and the need was satiated, he said basically, all right, we're going to sort of slowly wrap this up. And they ended up selling their car production lines to South America, but along the way they bought Willis Overland.
Yep.
So they ended up with Jeep. So they still had a car company. And then eventually AMC bought the company.
Yes.
And,
they bought it
AMC
from
being
Kaiser.
Hudson and Nash stuck together. For your listeners, you knew this.
Yep.
So that's a much sillier family tree than Chrysler's in some ways.
If you want to see a hodgepodge of stuff, because I made up this judging book, I copied over how to read a VIN on different models.
Oh gosh, I can only imagine.
Oh,
it was hard enough just for Chrysler.
Chryslers were actually pretty easy. What they did when they took over, when they bought AMC in 1987, Chrysler made them Chrysler type VINs in 1989. They redid the VINs so it's like the rest of the vehicles. In 1987 and 88, they still used AMCs. It is like a mess. I
can imagine.
I mean,
because AMC is. But the thing about AMC is, if you did work at AMC, and a lot of people there were from Chrysler, and they quit Chrysler because, at Chrysler you would have jobs like, okay, your job is to make the axle bigger or shorter, longer, or
Yep.
It's like. You're going to work on this gear. You're going to work on door hinges because it's a big company. At AMC, you could be a suspension engineer and still do work on the engine.
Yes.
It's fewer people doing much more with less. And some of what they did because of that, AMC was often class leading, although nobody would ever know it. The 4-liter engine, the 4-liter 6-cylinder comes to mind.
And that basis was through the 06 Wrangler.
Yes, and it was, when it came out, it was outpowering V8s everywhere. It was an insane engine for its power and efficiency, and it was a redo of something that they had had going on for, since the 50s, early 60s? I have this all written down somewhere, so I'm allowed to forget it at some point, unless I'm on a podcast, and then I have to remember it.
There you go. But also, AMC 6-cylinders were used in certain international light-duty trucks.
Yes.
Because we have the fire department I used to belong to has a 71 Scout 800B, and that has a 232 AMC engine in it.
Which is really pretty amazing.
It is.
It really is.
It's a great
Although you
engine.
can do a lot with gearing. I mean, Chrysler made Class 8 trucks, as I understand it, with slant sixes, but with 18 gears, you can do an awful lot of pulling.
Yes, absolutely.
You
In
won't do it very
fact,
quickly,
slant
but you'll do
sixes
it.
were used in the latter years of the military truck as far as export goes. It was done in America in '68. You know, the military style WM300, they still use the 251 flathead. But in later years, if you look in the 74 through 77 parts book, they used the medium duty version of the 225 slant six.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yep. So, well, I'll tell you what. Let's move ahead, and this has been a great conversation. We're over an hour into it, and I'm not bored. This is great. I would like to talk about current events now. What's
Okay, I will be here
been
in
going
the future.
on?
I just thought I'd mention that. I think I'll be here in the future anyway.
Yep. What are you finding out so far? I mean, as you know, when I do my news portion of my podcast, I use your articles, the Beard's articles from Still Power. I use Autoblog, and I use Mopar Insiders. I don't go by what other people are saying as an opinion. I don't do anonymous sources as some of these have. I just want to make sure it's true, and I always give the source where I get it from so they know where to get it. You've been keeping up with the recalls. You keep up with all kinds of different things at Chrysler. What's your sense of what's going on?
My sense is that they're very good at keeping secrets. There's a lot of talk among the employees, current and retired, about the low-wage country strategy and the emptying out of employees, which is very public because, you know, they go out there and they actually say, hey, look, we're giving buyouts to all of our employees, if they're, well, all of our non-union employees.
Yeah, 6,400 if I'm not mistaken this last round.
And I'm not, and I can tell you that I think that sort of thing is insane, and I'm basing this on having looked at organizations of various kinds over the past, 40 years or so. You know, having worked with organizations, this is not a productive way to do it. I realize that there's less need for people in Stellantis than there would be in 3 different companies. I mean, that's kind of obvious. That's the whole point of getting them all together into one place. It's because, and they're standardizing on, it's kind of interesting, you know, the old platform system. You would have the M body and the J body being different cars, mostly because the windshield was tilted. I don't know if there was any other difference.
You're talking in the 80s.
I'm talking in the 80s.
Yeah, the dashboards
in the 60s and 70s too.
Yeah, the dashboards were the same with the Cordova type J bodies and the R bodies of the Dodge St. Regis and Chrysler New Yorker.
Yeah, it was. So they had these. The platforms were sets of core dimensions.
Yep.
And that pretty much was it. So the B body platform could handle cars, and have different wheelbases, and they'd have different lengths, but certain key dimensions would always be the same. And then Fiat's version of platform, I never quite understood. I don't think Fiat ever quite understood it or made it perfectly consistent. But under Stellantis, it's very clear that they have a very advanced version of what a platform is. And they don't call it just platform, it's platform/architecture or some such. But basically, it's some dimensions and some chosen parts. And if you look at Stella Large, you know, it's a very, very flexible platform. It handles different widths, different lengths, different heights.
Yes.
It's supposed to carry, you know, Grand Cherokee is supposed to move on to that at some point, and the new Durango is supposed to be on Stella Large, and so is the Charger electric and gasoline. So they have modules that they can pick from. It's like defining a platform by which bucket of parts you can put in.
Well, we're back to spare parts again.
Yeah, well, that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yes,
it
is.
Parts. That's how you save the money, because stamping and tooling is crazy expensive, and it's the same cost if you make one car and if you make a million cars.
Yes.
Well, not really the same cost, but it's
the initial
if you have a
design
bad
of it
sales
and getting
year,
it going. Yes.
yeah, it's a fixed cost is basically what it is. It's not variable. It's always the same, whether your car does well or not. So the old E-body Challengers and Barracudas that failed so dismally, the cost for Chrysler was about the same as if they had sold like gangbusters.
Well, here's the
That's
thing
why they
about
were
that.
desperate.
Here's the thing about that, David. And I just noticed this just recently, about a couple years ago. The E-body Challengers and Barracudas. Normally, when you say this is what a car is based off of, it's what came out first. Am I correct?
Usually, yeah.
Okay. Well, they say, the Challenger and the Barracuda shared a lot of E-body parts.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, the B-bodies from 71 through 79, if you go by that analogy, was shared off the Challenger and Barracuda.
Yes.
And people don't I showed that to a friend of mine in a club I belong to. He has a 74 Challenger. And I have my red Cordova, and I put them side by side. I go, this car was based off your Challenger. And he thought, and he's a farmer, so he's very mechanically inclined and stuff. And I showed him, I go, look at the windshield. Okay, now look at your dashboard. Look where those heater and AC controls are on both cars. Look where the radio is. Look how the instruments are laid out. Look at the AC vents. What do you see? It's the same
Well, in a
thing.
sensible company, that's exactly what you would do, is that you would leapfrog your next design based on your most recent one.
Yes.
That would make perfect sense.
And
of course, they did a lot of that. I mean, it's the Australian Valiants. It's like, what happens if you merge an A-body and a B-body?
Yes.
And you throw in a kangaroo. It's, but, yeah, so let's see, where were we? Oh, right. So, but the other thing is the low-cost country strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that if you can have engineers in India and Brazil doing it, why would you pay engineers in France or Italy or United States to do it? It kind of, I don't know. To me, there are some downsides. First, I think I made it pretty clear in my couple of rants recently that I've never been a great believer in the leadership by firing percentages of people thing, where you say, well, we have 30% too high a payroll. Let's fire 30% of the people at random.
Right.
This should always be done step by step. You look at the people, you start at the top and you work your way to the bottom, and you get rid of the people who are not good. If normally these are people who should have either been fired already or who should have had their job changed to fit what they can actually do or moved into a different job or whatever. I mean, there are some people who are just useless.
Yes.
Often they survive anyway because they're really good at flattery, which is how they get promoted in the first place. So actually evaluating people, I mean, that's fraught with disaster, isn't it?
Absolutely.
But performance appraisal is not the best science ever developed. But still, that's what you should be doing, is looking at the people from the top down, because you can't start at the bottom. If you start at the bottom, you're going to be firing you're going to have supervisors making decisions before you know if the supervisors are able to make those decisions.
Yes.
So you start at the top. And then you go through and you get targeted reductions. And maybe there's people that you don't need because their specialties are gone. For example, you don't need quite as many people working on fuel flow modeling if you're not going to be making any brand new engines. So maybe you thin out that area a little bit, but but you don't start going through outsourcing testing to Rouge, and which is rumored to have happened. I don't have confirmation. You don't get rid of people who might be the most valuable people in the organization. And we all know people who you wonder how the organization survives without them when they retire. Like in the plants, you have the tool and die men, and some of them are insanely well-skilled, and they're not paid nearly enough for what they do, because sometimes, these guys, they can dramatically increase the efficiency and productivity of the machines. They can dramatically increase quality. And then they come out, and the company comes out and says, well, here's a buyout offer. We're not going to ask if you're, say, Chris Theodore, to pull a name of a high-performing engineer at random, or some schlub who just sort of shows up every day and doesn't actually do anything. We're not going to ask. Just apply here and fill out this form, and we'll give you a hunk of money. Thank you for working for us.
Yeah, I know.
That didn't work for AT&T. If people remember back in the day when AT&T was a real company before they were bought by Singular and Singular changed their name to AT&T.
Yes.
They did all that. They tried. GM did that once or twice back in the bad old days. Didn't help them at all.
In fact, they're going through an evaluation program themselves now.
Yes. It's you look at the companies that do this, and it doesn't usually work. You remember Chainsaw Al Dunlop?
I do not.
He would go through.
Okay.
Oh, he was big in the 80s. He was 80s man. I'm surprised that Harvard Business School didn't name something after him. He would go around and he'd say, in this organization, we have to cut by 40%. And he'd cut 40%, and the stock would fly up, and he'd go on and get hired by another company. And the company that he was at would go bankrupt because they couldn't do what they needed to do.
Sounds like what Peter DiLorenzo of Auto Extremists would call minimum Bob Nardelli did with Cerberus.
Well, yeah, I'd like to dislike Bob Nardelli. I always have a soft spot in my heart for him because I think, although he really screwed up Home Depot pretty well, I think when he got to Chrysler, he was concerned about his personal performance, and I think I'm going to give him credit for trying.
Yes.
He deserves the nickname. But I'm going to give him credit for trying.
Several things. One thing about Bob Nardelli is FCA got the credit for the 09 DS body Ram 1500.
Oh, yeah, which was definitely Nardelli.
And that was Nardelli.
That was Nardelli. And, he was the first guy who went around and looked at the cars and said, no, you can't. Are you kidding? You can't do that. Put another $400 into it.
Yep.
So he did okay, but around him people were scheming to sell the company out, and he got the blame for that.
Yes, because that was Cerberus's reputation to begin with.
Yes, well, yeah.
I mean, we're here to put some money into it, make it a lot more valuable, and then sell it and find something else.
That is pretty much what that class of organizations is supposed to do.
Yep. Now, the thing is
that they kept Chrysler Financial.
Yes, they did. Like Daimler bought into Chrysler, and Chrysler was one of the wealthiest car companies around. And in my opinion, and I heard John McElroy of Autoline say this as well, is that pretty much Daimler took the money and ran.
Yes, although they also took Huntsville Electronics and a couple of factories and ran, and Beijing Jeep.
Yep.
And the factory in Austria. But that's pretty much it.
And but you slightly got to give them credit too, because we got the third generation Hemi out of it.
Well, we would have had that anyway. That was under construction when they took over.
Oh, it was? Okay. So Daimler doesn't get the credit for that. That's a good thing. Thank you.
Take like 10 years. Yeah.
But the other thing, though, they did was, at least for 12 years, they were in NASCAR.
Yeah, I'll give them that.
Yeah, I'll give them that, And although Sergio, to me, really didn't bring out that much new stuff or anything else, I liked how he was very involved. And the thing is, he said it himself, a lot of executives don't like to admit too many things, but he's the one that says, I'm the one that pulled the plug on NASCAR. He goes, nobody else did, because we were taking loans from the government, and I felt we better not be racing if we're taking loans out because we don't have any money to run the company to begin with. But other than that, he pretty much, in my opinion, just pretty much milked everything along. When you looked at the engine lineups and things like that, he didn't change that much.
Well, he brought in the ZF8 speeds.
Yes, he did.
And he kept the Pentastar engines going, although Cerberus was planning to drop that whole line and just buy them from Nissan.
Oh, really? Okay, that I did not know.
That was one of the more amusing episodes from WaltPar. Somebody from Chrysler actually called me and gave me a amount of information that he felt would not help the competition, but would keep the program alive.
Okay. So
he wanted us to run stories on how it was there, and we did, and then they were picked up, I think, by Automotive News and by a few others. And so the program was not axed after all. But at the time, Cerberus was really hoping to sell to Nissan.
Okay. Now, here's the thing, too, that I'm finding different this time around. Regardless of what Cerberus did, regardless what Daimler did, regardless what FCA did, they at least ran Chrysler as a separate company pretty much. And to an extent, it worked to, if this company did good, it helped survive the other one, and vice versa. They kept Chrysler alive as a Chrysler corporation, even though it was called Daimler, Chrysler, Cerberus, or FCA. This time around with Carlos, he's just making everything one company and global. And that's what's scaring the crap out of me.
But yeah.
And
yes.
And the thing is that Carlos, I don't know, what was I going to say? I mean, he says one thing
like... Makes it a lot harder to do a Skunk Works, doesn't it? I mean, you don't get Skunk Works in a global outfit with teams around the world.
True. I mean, right now, he's doing everything he can to sell Chinese cars.
It's nuts, isn't it? First he talks about how they're the big threat that we have to stop, and then he comes in and says, oh, by the way, I can get you into Mexico and Europe.
That's right. And he's doing it.
Yeah.
And it was you that wrote about the Altos. Is that the name of the car? Attitude, yes. In Mexico. And how that's going to be Chinese. The Journey is Chinese. And so, who knows? It's a
bizarre strategy. I don't remember if they own any of GAC either.
Right. Yeah, that's GAC's for the Journey, right? No, that's
and for the Altitude.
And the Altitude, yes. Okay.
Yeah, it's what do you call it? Leap Motor.
Leap Motors is what he bought 51% of to sell Chinese cars to other countries.
Okay, let's be clear because I misreported it originally.
Okay.
He bought 51% of the joint venture for selling Chinese cars in Europe, but 20% of Leap Motor itself.
Okay. So I misread it. Okay. I was doing that on the top of my head, so.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, and you can always edit, I hope.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. But we're correcting ourselves now, so that's the big thing. So what companies do you have, because you do, I got to ask you about WaltPar, and then there's Stel Power, and then there's Motels. What happened with WaltPar? Because I used to go to that all the time, then they went to a forum.
Right, okay. I had cancer a few times, and the last time they gave me this chemo treatment, which was mitotane, a large 12 grams a day of mitotane, which is about, I would estimate, 12 grams more than anybody should actually be taking it. And it kind of wiped out my short-term memory along with pattern recognition and a few other things for a couple of years after I stopped. And I ended up selling WaltPar because I thought I really wasn't able to do it anymore.
Okay.
I could barely keep it going, and well, I can't really talk about the specifics very much or about the aftermath very much. But as you say, the main content of the site's kind of hidden. It's still there, but you have to search harder for it. And the news they took out a year or two ago.
Right. Okay.
So that was kind of annoying. But after 3 years passed, for no particular reason, I started. I contacted Patrick, and we started Stellpower to do news, like WaltPar used to do news. And then I split off Motels to do the more classical history stuff and the in-depth about the cars and and how they were made and that sort of thing. Mostly because WordPress is great for news, but it's lousy for the retrospective sites. So I created Motels is forgive the nerdiness in me coming out here, but Motels I programmed myself. It's done in basic HTML, PHP, and light SQL software. So the site, the pages are all kept in a big database, which gets backed up regularly, as you can imagine, and that brings up the random features, and it also creates the menu pages and so forth. So it's all very automatic compared to Allpar, which, keep in mind, when it was started in the mid-90s, and they didn't even have what you see is what you get software at that point. You had to program it in a text editor.
Okay.
So, and then upload it by whatever FTP program you liked. I think I use Fetch most of the time. And then they had Adobe, and then they had, it was Go Live something or other, and Adobe Dreamweaver. And I chose Go Live, which turned out to be foolish because Adobe bought it and killed it. And then I used Dreamweaver. So it was not a very, every part of the site had its own little bit of software, which were all getting rather dated. And every time that they updated Perl or PHP, something would break.
Ooh.
So it was kind of a problem keeping track of Allpar, and some of the parts of it were proprietary that I had bought, and the original companies had gone under. So that didn't help.
Wow.
I went through, I think, 4 different news programs, and only one of them is still supported. That's WordPress. I ended up with WordPress, like so many others.
Yes, I've heard of WordPress.
Yes, where aspirations go to die is you just give up and you get WordPress.
Yeah, I mean, myself, I don't care for Microsoft Excel. I was a huge Lotus fan.
Oh, then you wouldn't like Excel.
No, I wouldn't. Lotus was great. Lotus Ami Pro was great. Or 123 was great. The Ami Pro was great. I loved Lotus products. But
yeah, but CC Mail was terrible.
Yes, the mail was terrible. The calendar was good, but
I never used the calendar.
The calendar was pretty
used
easy.
Lotus a few times.
But when I went to Microsoft Excel, I go, this is what? So it's like, but we all have to get used to it. So,
yeah, well, it's better than Apple numbers.
True. What? Okay,
so
you have stellpower.com. You have
Motels.com.
Motels.com, and that's where people can reach you on social media. Then, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Well, yeah, the social media, we've got the Stellpower page, got the Motels page, and then we've got the group. What's the group called these days? Mopar Chat, I think.
Okay. And I know you have a Motels channel on YouTube.
Oh, right. The most important one I ignore. Or at least the one that gets the most updates these days.
Yes.
Yeah, and this may or may not last. We're going to see. I'm trying to get over 4,000 hours of views.
Okay.
I'm about 100 hours away. And that's when I find out if YouTube actually recompenses you for your time at a reasonable
right.
reasonable degree, so that I can, because if you do this right, like a webcast, if you do this right like a podcast, you need some special equipment.
Yep.
It's more expensive special equipment than a podcast requires.
Oh, yeah.
You're very smart to do a podcast.
Oh, absolutely. I've been a huge fan of radio for years, and
Oh yeah.
and I've got to write my congressman about the AM radio regulations because we got to have it so these radios can pick up a transmitted signal, not a cell signal.
Oh, I agree. AM is it's a safety precaution, isn't it? It's what works when there's an emergency.
People don't realize this, but when the atmosphere is right at night, where I'm here in Northeast Ohio, it's amazing all the cities that come in at night when you're listening to AM. Granted, the formats are pretty much all the same, news and talk, but it's amazing what you could pick up for cities like Chicago, Cleveland, New York City, Philadelphia, Georgia, Richmond, Virginia, all over St. Louis, all over the place.
Well, I think that the other thing we need is to get BBC's Channel 4 to come over here and do some AM broadcasts. Just to show them how you can do more interesting radio without making people hate each other.
I'll have to give that a listen sometime. That's available online for me to sample?
It actually is available online for you to sample. I'll have to talk to you. I'll have to send you a couple of things offline.
Okay. All righty. Well, I'll tell you what, David, we are 1 hour and 34 minutes into this, so I think we better call it a day. So I want to thank you.
You got your 12 minutes of chat. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
By the way, I once did watch years and years ago. I was at a police station to report a lost wallet, and I had to wait for about an hour and a half while the news media, one news crew, interviewed the police chief. And you ever notice how the police, when they're being interviewed on TV, have that deer caught in the headlights look and they say everything like a robot?
Mm-hmm.
It's because they've just said it about 300 times to the same person.
Yes.
I think they just keep on repeating it until the cop loses all sensation and just repeats it mechanically. And it's like, that's what we wanted.
That's right. So. This is what really happened. So. Well, David.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this very much. And like I said, I hit the big time. I got one of the major players in Mopar Media. So it was an honor and a pleasure talking with you, sir.
It is absolutely mutual. It was a pleasure, and I'm glad that we finally got to chat for realsies instead of by email.
You got it. You got it. So take care, my friend.
You too.
All right. We'll see ya. What did I tell you? That was a great interview I had with David A. Zatz of Stell Power. Again, it was still a huge honor that I was able to meet with him and have a great conversation. I hope you enjoyed it too. One thing I did not mention was the books that he had. He did mention them in the beginning of the interview. Please do not forget to check that out. And still, don't forget to check out stellpower.com daily for more information on current Stellantis news regarding the FCA brands. All right, what do you say we get to the event calendar? Yes, summer in the United States and the Northern Hemisphere may be over halfway done, but there's still great events coming up through the rest of the summer and into the fall. First off, we'll start off in the great state of Connecticut, September 22nd, 2024, the 16th annual Innovators Show and Shine All Mopar Show will be at Artioli Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Enfield, that's Enfield, Connecticut. The show will go on from 9 a.m. until 3 p.m. The hosting club, Mopars in Motion. Contact Ralph, 860-416-1228. In the great state of Florida, October 1st through the 5th. It's the newly relocated Mopars at the Beach in the Daytona Beach area. It's not Myrtle Beach. That's another show. Some great people took that over. But the reason Kathy Pearson Bridges moved to Florida, well, she did it for family. But she still wants to do the event. She was able to keep the name to the event. So please look that up. They've got a lot of great things going. You can search Mopars at the beach on Facebook, or you can go to moparsatthebeach.org for more information. November 2nd through the 3rd, Mopars with Big Daddy at Garlett's Drag Racing Museum in Ocala, Florida. You can phone 352-245-8661 for more information, or go to garlets.com. In the great state of Iowa, August 25th, Mopars on the Mississippi 2024 at the Dubuque County Fairgrounds in Dubuque, Iowa. And the show will go on from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. And the hosting club will be the Chicagoland Mopar Club. Go to their Facebook page. And it's called the Chicagoland Mopar Connection. The Facebook page to go to is search Chicagoland Mopar Club and look under events for more contact information. In the great state of Kentucky, August 31st, it's the 29th annual Southern Classic at Kentucky Dragway. In Clay City, Kentucky, contact James Pendergrass, or you can look or email them at moparsouthern.classic@gmail.com. September 13th through the 15th, one of the larger Mopar shows, Holly Moparty, will once again be held at Beach Bend Raceway Park in Bowling Green, Kentucky. You can go to moparty.com. Flyer that I have is on my Instagram account. Search WaltPar Podcast. In the great state of Michigan, September 21st, the 13th annual Michigan Mopar Muscle Club All Mopar Show and Swap Meet. It will go on from 8 a.m. until 3 p.m. at the Hub Stadium in Auburn Hills, Michigan. The hosting club is the Michigan Mopar Muscle Car Club. You can look them up on their website at michiganmoparmuscle.com or email showinfo@michiganmoparmuscle.com. Flyers also available on my Instagram account. Search WaltPar Podcast. Okay, let's see. In the great state of Minnesota, gotta skip that event. Okay, August 4th through the 9th, Plymouth Owners Club National Meet and Greet will be held in Brainerd, Minnesota. The hosting chapter will be the Tall Pines region. PlymouthOwners.club is the website to go to. The flyer is on my Instagram account. Search WaltPar Podcast. In the great state of Nebraska, September 11th through the 15th. There's more info I have to look up on this, but it's the Chrysler 300 Club International Fall Meet, which will be held in Omaha, Nebraska. September 14th, it's the 18th annual Mopar Mega Meet at Papillon La Vista South High School Stadium in Papillon, Nebraska. Contact Dan at 402-740-1054 or go to highimpactperformance.org. In the great state of New York, October 13th, 2024, Mopars at the Valley Car Show and Swap Meet at the Lebanon Valley Dragway in East Chatham, New York. The hosting club is the Capital Area Mopars. Go to dragway.com. In North Carolina, it's the Fall Mopars Meet at the Rock, November 16th at Rockingham Dragway in Rockingham, North Carolina. RockinghamDragway.com for more information. Still, 2 Ohio events left in Ohio. September 15th, it's the annual Chrysler Classic Chrysler Car Club of Toledo Car Show, which will be held at Yark Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram on the Central Avenue Strip in Toledo, Ohio. More information to follow. They don't do much on social media. I'll have to find a way to get in touch with them. If anybody knows for me to get in touch with them for more information so I can get this out, please email me, waltparpodcast@aol.com, or direct message me on any of my social media accounts. Search WaltPar Podcast. September 19th through the 22nd, it's the second annual World of Mopar at Summit Motorsports Park, the drag strip in Norwalk, Ohio. You can go to their website, summitmotorsportspark.com, for more information. In Ontario, Canada, October 17th and 18th, it's Mopar Fest, Canada's largest all-Mopar car show, which will be held each day from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m. at 251 Jacob Street in New Hamburg, Ontario, Canada. MoparFest.com for more information. August 13th through the 16th. It's the 59th Annual Airflow Club National Meet, which will be held at 4 Points Sheraton by Marriott in London, Ontario, Canada. Airflowclub.com for more information. August 24th, it's the 2nd Annual Motor City Mopar Show. It'll be held at Motor City Chrysler in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. Hosting club will be the Windsor Area Mopar Muscle Club. For more details, go to their Facebook page, which is search for WAAMM and look under events. In South Carolina, in Myrtle Beach, it's the Mopar Fever. This replaces Mopars at the beach. You know, I told you it moved to Florida. This replaces it, Mopar Fever. You can go to 8fo3mopars.org, or you can go to their Facebook page for more information. In the great state of South Dakota. August 24th, 2024. Moparama 2024 is back at Billion Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Hosting club is the Sioux Empire Mopars, the great state of Tennessee. September 28th, 2024. It's the 35th Annual Music City Mopar Club Show. It will be held at the Wilson County Fairgrounds in Lebanon, Tennessee. The hosting club is the Music City Mopar Club. And for more details, you can call them at 615-972-1056, or you can go to musiccitymoparclub.com. October 10th through the 12th, it is the Lone Star Mopar Fest in Houston, Texas. Hosting club will be the Space City LX Club. You can go to LSMF Weekend, or that lsmfwknd.com. It's more or less like a abbreviation of that, but go to that.com for more information. That's lsmfwknd.com. In the great state of Virginia, August 31st, it will be the Mopars in the Valley, powered by Berglund Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram, from 8 a.m. until 4 p.m., and this will be held at the Salem Civic Center. $20 for pre-registration, $30 day of the show. Rain date will be September 1st, 2024, and it's hosted by David Simmons and the Roanoke Valley Mopar Club. Search Roanoke Valley Mopar Club on Facebook. That's ROANOKE. And finally, the final stop on the Modern Street Hemi Shootout Series presented by Sippel Speed and Performance. It's October 18th and 19th. Their fifth and final stop will be at Maryland International Raceway in Mechanicsville, Maryland. For more information, go to hemirace.com. Now, if you have an all-Mopar event show, be it a show, swap meet, whatever, please let me know. You can email your flyer at WaltPar Podcast at AOL, or message me on my social media. Just search WaltPar Podcast. And please, prior going to an event, any event that you're wanting to go to, make sure you contact the event staff to make sure the show is still going on. But please, I'd love to hear from you. Let me know about your show, public, private, or whatever. Please let me know. Again, email me, WaltParPodcast at AOL.com. So thank you so much for joining me here on the WaltPar Podcast. Thanks to Ron and Glon, Jonathan Ramsey, and Zach Palmer of Autoblog, the Associated Press, Jared Balfour and Robert S. Miller of Mopar Insiders, Patrick Rall, and my guest today, David Zatz of Stel Power, and Automotive News for their contributions that they gave for the making of their contributions with episode 13 of the WaltPar Podcast. Also like to thank the people on my social media, the 50 followers and 75 people that are, and the 75 people who like my Facebook page, the 104 followers I have on X, the 375 followers I have on Instagram, and the 38 followers I have on Threads. Thank you so much. It means so much. Let me know. Search WaltPar Podcast and be part of the fun. Now, I have sent, I've said this before, I've sent Facebook messages and emails to over 100 Mopar and AMC clubs combined. And lately I've been handing out business cards to whatever few events I'm able to go to. But I've been following more people on social media, especially on Instagram, to help get my word out. But I can still use your help too. Please tell your fellow Mopar fans, lovers, and enthusiasts everywhere about the WaltPar Podcast. And please, if I would appreciate it very much. And please, if you can, give me a top rating wherever you listen to this, and also subscribe where you pick up this podcast, be it the podcast platforms or YouTube or Rumble. So, any questions, comments, concerns? I would love to hear from you. And I stressed that point when I was talking with the great people of the Mopar Nationals. Let me know what subjects you would like for me to look into. There's a couple I'm going to be doing. I'm going to try to get a hold of someone regarding the old cars from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, parts availability. That person doesn't know I'm going to call them yet, but I'm going to. I would like to do one. I heard a great suggestion at the Dragway 42 Mopar Madness at 42 show that what do I do for racing coverage? I don't have any, racing is a part of the car hobby. Okay, there's no doubt about it. It is. And it doesn't matter what the sanctioning body is. NASCAR, IMSA, IndyCar, Formula One, Formula E, NHRA, IHRA. It doesn't matter. Racing is a part of car culture. And my problem is that I don't know where to start and I don't know where to stop, because I want to make sure I give it my all when I do it. The SCCA, there's some challengers I think still running that, and other series as well. How far up do I go? Are there Mopar powered vehicles in the world of outlaws, sprint cars, whatever? I don't know, but the thing is, where do I start? Where do I stop in providing the proper coverage for everybody who listens to the WaltPar Podcast? But a new idea did come to mind. There is a small group of people in Ohio. Of course, it's my home state, so it's easy to get a hold of these people, but we can work on it if you're not in state. Because this is supposed to be a worldwide podcast. It's not supposed to be an Ohio podcast. Even though I do a lot of things from Ohio, it's to help me get things started. But there is a group of gentlemen, and I think females too, who have a Mopar car club, but they don't do it to show. They don't go to cruise-ins or whatever. They can if they want, but their concentration is on racing, and I will do that. I would like your suggestions on who I can call or talk to. The modern Mopars, let's face it, the Gen 3 Hemis are done being produced new. And you've heard me say this on episode 12. If they wanted to really keep this going, why didn't they come out with a new generation of V8s like 10 years ago? Because the Hemis we know of today, they're like 20 years old. They've been out for 20 years with very few revisions. So why didn't they take the research and make a more efficient V8, but also pack more power? Remember, look at those figures I gave on a 3-liter inline 6-cylinder with over 500 horsepower. We thought back when I graduated from high school, if you met the 1 cubic inch or 1 horsepower per cubic inch goal, you did pretty good. But now it's way better than that. So why couldn't they have done that and kept the Hemi going? Who knows? You've heard me say that before. I'm going to say that again. But please, I'd like to talk with them. I want to do a thing on Gen 3 Hemis are done as far as how we know them today. I would like to have someone to talk to in regards what models to look for, what not to look for when you look at one to buy to have fun with, because I'm treating this like if you're buying a classic car, because these will be future classics, no doubt about it. What to look for, what not to look for, parts to keep, because as the years and decades go by, parts will become less and less, but these cars will be no less exciting to drive. So if I can find someone who can help me with that, it would be great. Racing is a car club, what they do. Another subject I would like to get into are the cop cars. Because I think you've heard me say this before, but we now have a cool cop car in a Dodge Charger. The sheet metal is all the same as the cars you drive on the streets. So we got to get more youth involved in the car hobby because it's fun. We all love doing it. And that could be a nice low-cost way to get into the hot rodding for your child or for any child that you know of. I heard that on average, the State Highway Patrol here in Ohio, when their cars go up for auction, they go for about $3,500 to $4,000 a piece. Now, are they in the best of shape in the world? Maybe, maybe not. But you don't have that much of a loss if something goes wrong, and let your kids tinker with it. There is one girl who I met once. She took one of those early LD design Chargers, and she races that thing. And it just, she's got the wheels on it and everything. She even has a plate that she's a booster or helper of the Ohio State Highway Patrol. And she races that car, and it's a great base car. It's a 5.7 Hemi. It's a Charger. It has a gear shift on the column. So, yes, the interior is not going to be the flashiest thing around, but who says you can't change that? Maybe you don't. Maybe you could use that as a pure race car as she does, but she drives it on the street too. She was at the downtown Worcester Cruise in August one year, quite a few years back. But I saw that car at Dragway 42. I think I did see it in the distance at the Mopar Nationals, which was one weekend after another. But I want to get into that as well in hopes that maybe we can get more kids interested in the car hobby. But, you can't say get them off the phones, because we use the smartphones. I mean, I use it to double check and go through articles and get them zapped out real quick so every one of you could read them on my social media. But those are some of the suggestions I'm thinking in my mind. Please let me know if you have others. So please don't forget, check it out. Let me know. Now, please don't forget to check out the Dodge Pod with Robert. That's basically a good one on Dodge trucks. I haven't heard anything from Chris Albrecht from Talking Mopars in 3 months, and I've not heard a thing all year from the T-N-T podcast with Tara Graves and Tina Bogus. Those are the other three main Mopar podcasts that I know that are out there. Podcasts come, podcasts go. So we'll see what happens in the future. We hope they come back because they are great to listen to. Well, thank you so much for listening to the WaltPar Podcast today. Before I go, I do want to tell you or ask of you that when you go to a car show or a cruise-in, find a Mopar, because we're such a fractured community in the Mopar community. Find a Mopar that is totally unrelated to yours. Say hello and talk to that person and ask them about their car. And in return, I hope they ask you about yours. And that way, hopefully, we can get things united, because like I said before, the car hobby has been going down. We need to build it back up. We just can't think of ourselves and what we like. There's a lot of other great Mopars that are out there from 1921, 1925, all the way through. There's all kinds of great Chryslers with all kinds of great innovations, and to try those out is what we need to do. So this is it for the show. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you'll join me next time on the WaltPar Podcast. And as Mike Bonadonna of the Citrus County, Florida Mopar Club always says, keep those highways beautiful. Drive your Mopars. Thank you so much for listening. The WaltPar Podcast is a production of Auto Catawba LLC, and we thank you so much for joining me. And see you the next time around. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.